Nigeria's oil revenue increases by 129% to 9.4 trillion naira as the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation (NNPC) records trading surplus of 2.06 billion naira. Plus, ECOWAS Commission and the Africa Development Bank signed a $22.7 million grant retrocession grant. Global stocks draft as dollar advances and iron ore rises. I am Amina Nujaim and this is Business Express. Welcome. The ECOWAS Commission and the Africa Development Bank (AFDB) have signed a $22.7 million grant retrocession grant for 6-lane Abidjan-Lagos Corridor Development Project in Abuja. The president of ECOWAS, Jean-Claude Cassi, disclosed that the ECOWAS Regional Strategic Framework has prioritized development of key regional structures to foster a competitive business environment while increasing intra-regional trade. The corridor is approximately 1,080 kilometers long. It connects some of the largest and most economically dynamic cities in Africa: Abidjan, Accra, Cotonou, Lomé and Lagos. While covering a large portion of West African population, it also links vibrant seaports in West Africa. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation (NNPC) says a total of 735 million standard cubic feet of gas per day was delivered to gas-powered power plants in November of 2018, compared with 627 million in October of 2018. This was contained in the NNPC monthly financial and operations report for the month of November 2018. It shows that out of 212.93 billion cubic feet of gas supplied during the period, a total of 123.29 of gas was supplied, commercialized, consisting of 36.14 and 87.15 for domestic and export market. The release, signed by the Group General Manager Public Affairs Division, Mr. Undu Ngamadu, said this translated to a total supply of 1.204 billion standard cubic feet of gas to domestic market and 2.905 billion cubic feet of gas supplied to the export market for the month, implying that 57.91% of the average daily gas produced was commercialized, while the balance of 42.09% was re-injected, used as upstream fuel gas or flat. In a related development, Nigeria's oil revenue went up by 129% to 9.4 trillion naira in 2018, buoyed by increased crude oil price. According to economic report for the fourth quarter of 2018, released by the Central Bank of Nigeria (CBN), the total oil revenue rose 129% to 9.4 trillion naira in 2018 from 4.1 trillion naira in 2017. Non-oil gas revenue also rose by 21% to 3.1 trillion naira from 3.2 trillion naira in 2017. Consequently, oil revenue accounted for 71% of total federally collected revenue, which rose by 82% to 13.3 trillion naira in 2018 from 7.3 trillion naira in 2017. However, total federally collected revenue fell 4.8% to 2.4 trillion naira in fourth quarter of 2018 due to decline in non-oil revenue. The change agenda of APC-led administration came under scrutiny as stakeholders converged on Abuja to assess the impact of the policies on the social well-being of Nigerians. Chimaobi Walter Anaji was at the National Policy and Development Summit, where speakers affirmed the positive changes witnessed in different sectors of the nation and filed in this report.
Seated in this hall are participants drawn from various walks of life, brought together by the Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Policy Development and Analysis to x-ray the scorecard of the present administration's policies and developments. Some of those who reviewed the programs highlighted the Anchor Borrower Scheme, Green Alternative, and the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan of the federal government as key strategies that have brought about a revolution in different sectors of the economy.
Once there is policy sincerity, once there is consistent maintenance of a policy principle, all things will fall into place. And I like to say that NASL is the testimony to consistency and faithfulness in policy design and policy implementation, and we hope to do more.
The summit has as its objectives to create awareness and understanding among the people, policymakers, and international community on government efforts to solve the nation's problems.
Despite these challenges which the government inherited, the government had always been reminded by its promise for change. A change that people yearn for, and a change that it must continue to deliver.
With the lessons learned in the policy reformation of the present administration, it is expected that with the re-election of President Muhammadu Buhari for another 4-year term, this agenda will come to fruition. In Abuja, Chimaobi Walter Anaji.
And to look at matters arising from the 2019 National Policy and Development Summit, we have in the studio Professor Uche Owaleke from the Nasarawa State University, a friend of the program. Welcome. We also have Dr. Roni Ajao. She is a public sector consultant based in the United Kingdom. Welcome to Business Express.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
You were at the summit. What would be your biggest takeaway?
I start by saying that, of course, you know that from the onset, this administration identified 3 major challenges that it was going to address, namely anti-corruption, insecurity, and of course the economy. And what actually came out from that summit is that, with regard to these 3, a lot of achievements have been made. And that there is need for these achievements to be communicated to not only to Nigerians, but also to the international community, at least to change their perception, of Nigeria. You recall that not too long ago, one Raila Odinga, from Kenya, made a joke about the high rate of corruption in Nigeria, and that's, of course, talking from a position of ignorance of the current state of things. So it's important that this is communicated not just to Nigerians but to the international community. But the whole takeaway from that summit boils down to the fact that yes, some good foundation has been laid, but it's still work in progress. A lot still more can be achieved.
Now, the summit focused on the economic journey of Nigeria so far. What would you say the challenges are of the Nigerian economy and possibly a way forward in the long run?
Before even the challenges, you look at the ERGP, from where the economic blueprint you know, is flowing. One of the objectives here says to restore growth, and you would agree with me that the economy is right now on the path of growth, going by, you know, the fact that last year we recorded about 1.9% growth in GDP as opposed to what we saw in 2017. Now, with respect to the challenges, what I see, what remains a major challenge today is the fact that we still don't have enough to do so much. So the revenue base is still shallow. The issue of low revenue remains a challenge, and that is why you find the issue of public debt, you know, appearing as if it's a burden. Okay, at 20% of GDP, the public debt isn't supposed to be a problem, because if you go by the threshold, international threshold, it's around 56%. Ours is 20%. But why is it a problem? It's because of the, you know, the low revenue base, because debt service to revenue ratio is as high as 67%. So that for me is the major challenge that we are still confronted with. So the way forward is to see how we can you know, ramp up, you know, our revenue efforts to ensure that you know, that's not a problem.
Okay, Dr. Ronnie, I see you shaking your head.
Absolutely.
What would you add to what he has said?
Well, I think Professor's actually outlined a lot of key issues and factors, and I think with regards to increasing our revenue, there are lots of opportunities that I think we can approach. For instance, in Nigeria, we've got a percentage of about 70% of our population that are under the age of 35. That's huge. And in relation to that figure, at least 78% of that, based on 2017, are unemployed. So what can we do? So we've got a high unemployment youth rate, and it's maximising the youths to generate the economy. And I know currently there are some policies. Empower is one, to give an example, what we're doing in the agricultural sector.
How would you assess the Empower project, for instance?
The Empower project, actually, it's laudable, absolutely, and it's getting youth in the right direction.
Okay.
We've had lots of positive feedback with regards to those that have actually been engaged in the program. Today we have well over 500,000 youth engaged in Empower, so that's fantastic. And what I was actually going to suggest is, at the moment, STEM, because we want to make sure that our economy is ready for the future. STEM, science, technology, is very important. So we have a percentage of infrastructure deficit, which is significant in terms of our GDP. Normally the ratio at the moment is 30%, and Professor can correct me here. So what I'm saying is that we could have a similar process like that that we've done for Empower for the infrastructure. So what I'm saying is using the youth to actually increase our infrastructure development in Nigeria. That will, number one, reduce unemployment. Number two, improve our infrastructural development, and also grow revenue within the country at the same time.
Why is Nigeria then deficits, the STEM?
In terms of our educational policies, what we need to do is improve the focus we have. So we really need to look at our national curricula and change it to make sure that it meets the requirements of the 21st century. So what I'm saying we should do is increase science, technology within the colleges and within schools across the nation.
Absolutely.
There is a huge need for us to improve education. And whilst I preach it's not one of the key priorities of government in terms of the three focus areas, I think it should be one that they should definitely look to improve it.
Okay, talking about improvement, Professor Owaleke, the projected growth for Nigeria by the World Bank is 2.2, then IMF says 2%, meanwhile federal government is saying 3.01. Yeah.
Yes.
So, arriving at these numbers, what are the parameters?
Of course, that of the World Bank and the IMF. You rightly mentioned the World Bank is projecting 2.2%. In June, I recall that in June last year, their projection was actually 2.1. So just recently, the World Bank, thought that there was reason to increase it to 2.2, and that's mainly on the back of expected bright outlook in the oil price. So the World Bank thinks that oil price will not crash. This is a country that depends so much on oil. and that's what is influencing its forecast. But of course, that of the government, you know, it is the government that understands, is the person that wears the shoe that knows where it pinches. So the government understands that there are a lot of prospects, there are opportunities that with the kinds of investments it is making in infrastructure, you know, for example, that is expected to spur aggregate demand, to spur to of course reduce unemployment rates, spur aggregate demand, and increase growth. That is why the government is a bit more ambitious than what we have, you know, by the World Bank and the IMF. As I said earlier on, last year the economy grew by 1.9%, and that was more like what the World Bank and IMF also had last year. So I think realistically that the projections by the World Bank and IMF, you know, they are quite attainable.
Okay, Dr. Ronnie, there has been calls to sustain the recovery process to maintain growth. Would you say, what would you say was the way forward? You did make mention of potentials earlier on.
I think, thank you very much for that question. It's a very good question. In terms of growth, what Nigeria needs to do, and I think what Nigeria is doing, is sustaining that. And the question you're asking is how. And that's actually building on the policies. And that's why yesterday's event was very crucial. It's actually making an assessment as to where we are, what policies can we push forward to sustain the growth trajectory that we've got to the future. And one of the examples I cited was the fact that creating more jobs for the youth. There is a positive push by this current administration at the moment, but I think that needs to go a step further. And not only that, it's the continuity, ensuring that these policies are implemented, are sustained, and are adequately monitored and measured, because that's one of the things that we suffer from. And I think it's not just Nigeria, but in Africa generally, we don't tend to hold data to enable us to measure our performance against specific policies that we're implementing. And I think that's another angle that I think we can improve upon.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to quickly mention something here. There is also this social investment intervention scheme that the government yes, and of course a lot of successes have been recorded. Whether it's the school feeding program, even the Empower is of course part of them, and including the trader money and so on. The point I want to make is this: yes, the government is desirous in ensuring that credit gets to the real sector, and that that way to unemployment can be reduced. But in doing so, we should also be conscious not to duplicate efforts.
Yes.
At the moment, there are talks to establish Trader Money Bank, Entrepreneur Bank. We already have the Bank of Agriculture, we have the Bank of Industry, and the Central Bank is talking about also establishing National Microfinance Bank. In my view, all these are trying to duplicate, we are trying to duplicate efforts. And if you recall, in the past, the Bank of Industry, in 2001, was a fusion of so many of such banks. We had the Nigerian Bank of Commerce and Industry. We had the Nigerian Industrial Development Bank. We had NEFOND. All of them came together to form the Bank of Industry. The point I'm making is important we consolidate these efforts, such that we don't duplicate them, and at the end the objective is not achieved. So going forward, that is what you should be thinking of.
Okay, in all of this, it's talking about revenue. Now, looking at Nigeria's revenue drive vis-a-vis the expectations for the 2019 budget, what would you say?
Yes, if you look at the 2019 budget, it's still tilting more towards oil revenue. But of course, that's not to say that efforts are not being made to ramp up non-oil revenue. If you also recall, there was a time even the FIRS said that their target for 2019, is going to move from 5.3 to 8.3 in 2019. And that event yesterday too, the chairman of the chairman of the
event,
this federal in charge of federal allocation, committee, he was also there, to provide facts and figures about the sources of revenue and how those revenues will be shared. So yes, non-oil revenue is bound to increase in 2019, and that is also that should be the focus, so that we don't continue to depend on oil revenue in case anything happens to the to the oil price, which we don't pray for.
Dr. Ronnie, now in closing, 2019, adding more to what he has said.
Go ahead.
What would your projections be for 2019?
Well, I think the economy will definitely grow. It will strengthen. If we look at some of the internally generated revenue, for instance, even within various institutions, and I use in the educational sector, JAM, for instance, because of the way they've restructured the organisation in terms of revenue, they've actually plugged a lot of the holes. In 2015, revenue from JAM was about 15 million, if you equate that to US dollars, but yet in 2017, it was well over $500 million. So what I'm saying is that the internal, to add to what Professor has said, internally, in the changes that are making with regards to various institutions, that again is strengthening the revenue with regards to what Nigeria is producing. So looking at other sectors, the agricultural sector, the mineral sectors, and so many other diverse sectors, it's diversifying. Hollywood, Nollywood is another example whereby that again is generating so much revenue for the country. And so Nigeria is definitely on a positive trajectory. What we should do is continue pushing these policies, continue designing, developing, and ensuring these policies are sustained for the next
positive prospects for 2019.
Yes, I was referring to the Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission, the chairman.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Ronnie Ajao, a public sector consultant. A pleasure having you on the program.
Thank you.
Professor Uche Owaleke from Nasarawa State University, thank you for joining us
You're
again
welcome
today.
too. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
You are still watching Business Express on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, moving on, the Ministry of Mines and Steel Development is putting in efforts to ensure the rapid recovery of more solid mineral resources in the country. This was demonstrated as more equipment is now available to realize this goal. Mia Ogidi reports.
Prospecting for either solid mineral resources or potable water underground can sometimes be an exercise in futility if the right equipment are not applied. Gathered here are members of the geological family, courtesy of the Ministry of Mines and Steel Development and the Guideline Geo, to train practicing geologists on the workings of a restivity system for the prospecting of solid mineral resources in Nigeria.
In mineral exploration, this will help us to locate the position of the mineral deposit within the subsurface, and apart from that, it will also help us to quantify. We can know the vertical and lateral spread of such mineral deposit, and that will help us, one, to reduce the time wastage, two, to reduce the amount of money and resources deployed into wide cast drilling, because
use it for water search. That's a very common application, but we also have engineering applications such as looking for the depth to bedrock and determining how strong the bedrock might be if we were wanting to build on it, or perhaps needing to dig it out and take it away.
The 2 days training is purely a practical one.
It has been an interesting week for traders at the Nigerian stock market as concerns over investor apathy wanes. At the close of trade this Wednesday, the OSHA index gained 0.16% to close at 30,821.80 basis points. Market capitalization also gained to close at 11.4 trillion naira. Investors traded 359 million shares valued at 4.8 million naira executed in 3,319 deals. U.S. stocks index futures traded lower on Wednesday morning after President Donald Trump delivered his second State of the Union address. How are global stocks trading? We take a look. where we drop the anchor at this point. Do join us same time Friday as we bring to you more developments in the economy. Keep talking and thinking business. I am Amina Nushain.